teamwork in order to do the procedures in going to the moon. So you see that there's not a lot of room in there. But again, we were trying to get longer and longer and longer exposures in space. Now I want you to get out of your way here. I want you to see, this is a Gemini capsule over here. Together. See, there's not a lot of room in there. Also, it looks very, very much like a 1960s fighter pilot or fighter cockpit. That's the technology that we had. There were no such things as a touchscreen computer, so you have toggle switches and buttons and so on. The longest mission in Gemini was flown by Borman and Lovell. That was 14 days. I don't think I'd like anyone to spend 14 days in there. And you can't go anywhere. You're not necessarily strapped down, but still, there's no place to go. You have to do some isometric exercises, but there's nothing to do. But it's very, very important. This is where we learn how to catch up with another object, rendezvous with it, dock. How we learned how to do extravehicular activity. The door would open, the astronaut would go out, and that was where we first performed those operations. This yellow tube over here, that is the umbilical line that connected the astronaut outside to the spacecraft. Pete Gibson always complained that he wanted to take the umbilical cord off. He said, let me go out there and fly around myself. This is, I guess we'll call it a space gun. It's got compressed air in it, and you can point it and move around from place to place. And you see the Martian, it's kind of the same idea there. So at any rate, this was a very, very important step in the program, of just learning what we can actually do. Now, when we started the program in 1961, when you came through the rocket park over there, those little ballistic missiles, similar to this, were the only thing that we had in this country. We had to scale up from this to that. That was a monumental task. Now, the one standing up over there is Skylab 1. We had to kludge that together because we had no rocket big enough to put the spacecraft, the Apollo spacecraft, into low Earth orbit to test it and develop it. So we had to figure out some way to get it up there. What we did is we took the center tank, we took the tank of a Jupiter missile, which happens to be over there, as the centerpiece, and then we clustered 8 Redstone tanks around it, half of them for fuel, half of them for liquid oxygen. And then we took the largest engines that were in the world, and we upgraded them, and we put 8 of those engines on that vehicle over there. That gave us a total of 1.5 million pounds of thrust, which was just enough to put the Apollo spacecraft into low Earth orbit and test it out and develop it. Well, had we used those engines on this vehicle, we would have taken 40 of them on this stage right here. That's a bit impractical. So we had to scale up from that little engine to these engines. Each one of these engines developed as much thrust as all 8 of those other engines. And we had to develop all new, not all, but largely new materials, new techniques, new machinery to make this happen. And we blew up a number of engines. And there's nothing wrong with a smart failure. I tell the kids that, too. Nothing wrong with a smart failure. If you do something wise and know what you're doing, you learn more from a failure than you do from a success, often. So at any rate, that's how we learn what not to do. and that's as important to learning what you can do. So now these engines here power this vehicle. This out here is a mock-up. It's a very good mock-up, but this is actual production hardware. People ask, well, did this fly? Did it? Obviously not, because none of this ever comes back. The only thing you ever get back is the little capsule system. tip top of this vehicle. You can't even see it up here. That's the only thing that ever comes back there. So this was never intended to fly, but it is exactly like the flight articles because this is what we call the dynamic test vehicle. Over here in the Marshall Center, we have the tallest building in Alabama. We put the whole vehicle in there. Then we twisted it and turned it, shoved it, pulled it, twisted it, bent it, did everything we could to it to test the structural integrity of the design. So it was a very, very important step because no one had ever built anything this large, this light. So now we have this hardware here that is representative of the actual flight hardware. Now I'll tell you a little bit about this vehicle about going to the moon. First of all, this vehicle is equivalent to a 35-story building. It's 363 feet long, 33 feet in diameter. And I heard wonderful explanations by people who weren't involved in the program of why those were the perfect dimensions to go to the moon. Now you see it's almost a 10-to-1 ratio, which does make sense. But the fact of the matter is, we built the first 5 of these first stages right here at the Marshall Center using civil servants. And the door of the manufacturing building was 36 feet. It's like building a sailboat in the basement. So I have to figure out some way to get it out. All right. So that set the diameter, and then the length was 10 times that. So, all right. Now, this vehicle, sitting on the launch pad, weighs 6.5 million pounds. But all of that, 6 million of it is fuel. So when the kids say, how do you get to the moon? It's very simple. You take a 35-story building, you take all the structure out of it, you fill it full of high explosives, and then you put the largest engines in the world that don't exist yet, and then you're all set. That's all you have to do. So at any rate, with this vehicle, 6 million pounds of the total weight is the fuel. It says that all of this structure, which ultimately is thrown away, weighs about 458,000 pounds. I'll put that into perspective. I believe that nature's most perfect mechanical design is an egg. It's a beautiful design, perfect. If you go home, let your students do this someday. You can go home, take a hen's egg, and weigh it, then crack it and weigh the shell. And you'll find that the shell is about 10% of the weight of the egg. All of this inert structure is about 9% of the total weight of this vehicle. So it's equivalent in structural efficiency to an egg.
Wow.
So that was the trick. How do you build something this huge, this strong, and make it as light as you possibly can? So this first stage is powered by kerosene and liquid oxygen. Kerosene, well, actually it's RP1, but that's just a high-graded kerosene. We had most of our experience at that time was with kerosene and liquid oxygen. The reason we have to use liquid oxygen is your car burns the oxygen out of the air. Of course, you can't do that if you're flying in space. So you have to take the oxygen with you. You can't do it in a gaseous form because you have a tank so huge that you never get it off the ground. So we have to liquefy it. And so we use liquid oxygen and kerosene, which is not the highest performance chemical fuel, but it's perfect for getting us started off the ground. The first stage job is to overcome gravity, get the vehicle moving, and get it through the friction of the atmosphere. Now we think that there's nothing up there. Actually, there is friction going through the atmosphere. So this first stage gets you from 0 to 6,000 miles an hour in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And that puts you about 220,000 feet, or about 39 miles, which is just at the top of the atmosphere. So this job is just to get you through the atmosphere. And then for the upper stage, we'll talk about those a little later, we want higher performance from that point on. So let's say we're using liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, or kerosene for these engines. Now, question. How do you steer a rocket?
Tail fins?
Huh?
The fins?
Fins? No, the fins don't help you. They're there for stabilization. How are you going to steer a rocket? How do you steer a rocket? Well, if you have a bottle rocket, you just light it and you just move wherever it goes. You know, you can't have that, so how are you going to steer? Right, same way you do a boat. If you have a rudder on a boat, you turn the rudder one way and the boat goes that way. Same thing. The center engine is fixed, but the four outside engines actually gimbal. They can move in direction. And so the computer is constantly checking the position of the vehicle against a predetermined flight path and determining what the correction is to put it back on path. And so those engines are constantly adjusting to keep it on course. So that's a very, very important thing. You've got to control the rocket, get it to the right place at the right time. Because if you're going to anywhere in space, it's not a matter of just launching any old time you want to. If you're having to rendezvous with something, if for example we were going directly to the moon, which we're not, if you wanted to land on the moon and you were landing here, you have to take off when the moon is coming up this way, so you're in the same place at the same time. So it's a very precise operation. So at any rate, these engines develop 7.5 million pounds of thrust. I'm just going to make an assumption that the cars that you have probably have something on the order of, we'll say, 200 horsepower. Okay? These engines develop 100 million horsepower. Basically a million automobiles. And this first stage has 500,000 gallons of fuel. These engines burn that fuel at the rate of 28,000 pounds per second. 28,000 pounds per second. So you have to have a lot of filling stations along the way. So one way to handle that is, this is a 3-stage rocket. You don't want to, it's very inefficient to have one rocket take you all the way to the polar boat. So we do it in stages. When the first stage burns up this fuel, it's discarded so that you're not carrying dead weight. And the second stage, the same way. And that's why we throw away everything except for the capsule at the end. So I'll get down to this cutaway model down there. I'll talk to you about that. Any questions?